Today, we talk with an individual who embodies working for your dreams. We will talk about that and whether or not the Cleveland Browns will ever stop sucking on the Fatman's Guide podcast. Fireside Chat 1, Thomas Frank Carr. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm putting out my very first interview, but before we do that, I do want to thank you all for listening. A little bit more big news. We have been added to another big provider. iHeartRadio is now carrying us. Please like, subscribe, and share, and if you get a chance to go to iTunes and write a review, hey, that would be awesome, and give me 5 stars. Today's guest is an analyst for Pro Football Focus and the sports director for ESPN 1450 and FM 1037 radio in State College, Pennsylvania. He is also a sports writer for the Blue White magazine and a contributing author on numerous other football publications. We had a Zoom conversation about how he's working his tail off to achieve his dreams of being a sports reporter, as well as talking briefly about the Browns, Steelers, and the Bills offseason so far. Now, guys, this is my first online interview, so please forgive me for some of the audio difficulties. Now, without further ado, my man, Thomas Frank Carr. So, hey, Thomas Frank, it's awesome to have you on. Thank you for being here on the podcast. You're my very first interview, which is awesome. I was just telling you before we got started that if I could make this podcast happen, you're one of the first people I'd want to have on here. And in a second, I'm going to get into kind of asking some questions about the NFL because obviously I know if I've got all this right. Why don't you go ahead and tell everyone kind of some of the sports background that you have as far as who you work for?
I actually had to write it down. Currently, I am the sports director and program director of ESPN Radio 1450, which is what you see in the background here. I co-host, I just got done with the show, Sports Talk with Steve Jones. I'm also the producer and board operator for that. I write for Blue White Illustrated, so I do game breakdowns after the game, watching the film, kind of saying what happened, not how you felt it happened, what actually happened on the field. I'm also an analyst for PFF, that's Pro Football Focus, the football analytics company. And I also am the on-field host for the minor league baseball team in town in the summers called the State College Spikes. So if it exists, I've probably done it.
Awesome. And you know what's really kind of cool for the people who don't know you and why I'm so excited to have you on? I've had this thing going, the Fatman's Guide that I've been doing for a year now and doing some videos and stuff. And the kind of the tagline that I've been using this whole time has been living life to the fullest without excuses. And you're one of those guys. And when I think back, well over a decade ago, I'm pretty sure, you always wanted to be this guy. You wanted to be this guy who was getting out there and being involved with sports and getting into broadcasting. And tell me a little bit about what your journey has been like. Because let's be honest, you come from where we're at, small town America. This is tiny town America.
Yeah.
And other than some little tiny Midwestern state that's got 8-man football, we're a small town. And you go from a small town, these big dreams that probably a lot of people are like, oh, come on, Thomas, Frank. All you got to do is aim for something a little bit more professional. It's almost like wanting to be, in my eyes, almost like wanting to be a songwriter or an actor, And, you said, hell no, it's something I want to do. Kind of give us a little bit of idea into your journey to get to where you are right now.
Well, the first thing I have to say is that I haven't made it yet, so it's still a journey. It's always going to be a journey. Sure. Because if you want something bad enough, I don't think the desire, the journey ever stops. Mm-hmm. You asked me such a big question, and talking to you brings me back to high school football, and even further than that. As you know, I was in the marching band for most of high school because my oldest brother, who you played football with, broke his back playing football, so I wasn't allowed to play. But my mom saw how much it meant to me, and the fact that I was, during practice at band, I was throwing the football and not practicing my instrument, that I got to my senior year play football. And it's just something I've said my whole life, I'm betting on me. I believe in myself, and I believe that I can do this for a living, but I know it's a lottery ticket. I believe that I'm in the 1% of people that are going to make it someday. And I refuse to let go of that. I don't know if that's stubbornness. I don't know if that's, believing or positivity. It's just, at this point, it's the only way I know how to exist. So it's been a long road, and I don't think I could fully summarize it, but I went to Penn State. I was lucky enough to get into Penn State as a freshman at main campus. I was involved in radio from an early point there, where there was an online radio station called Com Radio. It's a student-run radio station. And within a month of school, I had my own talk show. And I was actually mentored by a guy who I now work with, Jeff Brown, who he was the second professor I ever had at school. I ended up getting married in his backyard. He's my coworker now. Really helped me get into radio. But radio has always been a means to an end for me because I love football, and I always have. It's one of those things about me that's always been there, like I have brown hair. And it's been kind of an obsessive quest my whole life. After I graduated, Jeff actually helped me get a job. It was not in sports. I was a part-time afternoon radio DJ on a hot AC station. So, playing pop music like Selena Gomez and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would take any opportunity I could have and I could find to do sports. When I got here, the guy who had been covering Penn State football and going to the press conferences and stuff, unfortunately passed away of colon cancer, and they hadn't filled the job. So I just said, as a part-timer, I'm like, I'll do it for free. I'll just go to the press conferences and sit there. And basically, I just picked up where I left off, where I was going to press conferences as a student. Now I'm a professional. And I was working at a pizza shop at the time, part-time. Basically, if you want something, go for it and do everything in your power to get it. Because the reality is, it's hard. It is so incredibly hard. And there's so much sacrifice that goes into making your dreams come true. I think a lot of people, like you said, think that sitting down and talking about something is easy, and being interesting and having interesting, intelligent things to say is so much more than just sitting down and having an opinion, at least to me. And I've always, tried to be informed about football and know more about football and all these things. And
the thing is
that, sorry.
Like, no, you're fine. The thing is like I look at myself. I've been doing football now for over 30 years. And I mean, I don't think I'm an expert, but I would say I've picked up a lot of stuff over 30 years of doing football. And one of the things that always, there's a lot of people who come up and want to, think that I would talk a lot of football. I don't talk a lot of football with people. And most that's because I think for someone like you, when you're dealing with the truly educated individual when it comes to football, it's frustrating to talk to people who don't understand football. You mentioned it, I think on your one show there, not what you think happened out there during the game, what actually happened. And how many times is it that you're going to have individuals who are going to look at a game and go, oh, this, that, and everything else happened. You're sitting going, you have no friggin' idea what actually occurred during this game. You just want to say things that make you sound smart instead of recognizing, what the actual, X's and O's of what was going on or the decisions that were made during a game. And I think that, to that point, that's one of the reasons that for you, I've always like listening to you, and even like the articles that you've written for a number of publications so far. I love reading them just because of the fact that I know I'm getting something legitimate. And I think, you said that, you haven't made it, but see, I look at you right now and you may not have made it, but like you said, it's a nonstop process. Life is a nonstop process. And the fact that you're where you're at, you're only building to where you're going to finish, but you're nowhere close, because even if you got to ESPN main campus, you're going to be striving for what's the next thing, because that's what a person like you does. And that's why I wanted to have you on. So when you're looking at, I think sports as they are right now, obviously we have COVID-19. I'm sure someone's gonna be asking, what does someone talk about when we haven't had sports in a month? Which, I can't even imagine how, Great Depression like that is in America. We live in so what's that like trying to prepare for that kind of a day?
So for the most part on the show, I am tasked with getting guests to talk to our host, Steve Jones, who is the voice of Penn State football and basketball. And it's basically, as much as there isn't sports, there's always news. And part of the sports news process, at least for me, is finding what's actually interesting and then putting those people on the show with Steve to talk to about pressing issues. So Calvin Booth is a former Penn State basketball player, and he is a potential GM candidate in the NBA. He's been working his way up through the ranks and is with the Denver Nuggets right now. Their GM just left to be in a high-ranking position with the Bulls. So he'd be the first Penn State basketball player to reach such a position. So I reached out to a guy from the Denver Post, and we had him on to talk about that and, what that journey's been like for Calvin. And, obviously Steve has a depth of knowledge and experience and understanding that when people come on the show, he has an educated conversation with them. So my job right now is to facilitate those intriguing conversations that people like to listen to and finding the information. Obviously the NFL draft is coming up. We had a draft guy on today from PFF, and just trying to find people and things that are happening, because the reality is things being canceled is as much news as things not happening. And with the things, there's something new every day that you can put in your sports update. Penn State recruiting is still going on, so there's all that as well. And it's just about, if you can talk about stuff, hopefully you can find interesting things to say.
There's always something. You mentioned the draft. Let's talk real quick about the NFL. Obviously being from Northwestern Pennsylvania, I could have you on here for 40 minutes talking about all the teams in the NFL. My thought was to ask you just, about the three local teams that a lot of people around here kind of listen to. And that's most people are listening to my podcast anyway. There's no one from San Diego listening to this. So
you don't know that, or maybe you do. I don't know.
Not yet. I mean, I'd love to get to that point. But so the three, I guess the way I'll do them in order, my first one I'd ask you about, how do you think the offseason has been for what I call the train wreck, that being Cleveland? Obviously, that's my opinion. Last year was an absolute joke and a farce considering what they were supposed to do. How do you think Cleveland's done in the offseason? And maybe real briefly, where do you think they're heading in the draft from a picture?
I think everything is about Baker Mayfield. They made the right choice. I firmly believe Baker Mayfield is one of the better quarterbacks that I've watched in college. He's one of the better prospects that I've ever watched come out of the draft.
He's a hell of a competitor.
But he's intelligent too. It's not just that he's competitive; is that there's an intelligence about football with him. And I just unplugged my own headphones. Hold on. He's intelligent. He sees the field properly, and I think he has a lot of the intangible factors that you can't see unless you know what you're looking for. As far as he was doing advanced things and moving safeties with his eyes, and looking off defenders, anticipating windows to throw into in zone and man coverage, knowing where players are going to show up. The problem is, as much as he had the supporting cast at receiver, I think the offensive line was an Achilles heel for him because he's athletic and he's mobile. But if one of the problems that he has is there are times when he can get above his skis a little bit when he's got pressure in his face. I think he deals with it, but I don't think the situation, the offense, any of those things, Freddie Kitchens was not a good coach, not a good manager of people. Those things are resolved, and I like the system they brought in for him. Now it's about getting offensive line talent to protect him. And from there, we'll have a good evaluation of, am I right? Is he good? I believe he is. I believe he will be. There are certain things that go into football as far as, and you know this, like interceptions aren't always the quarterback's fault. You always get blamed for him, though. I think there's a lot of bad luck that's gone on with him, and he hasn't been put in the best situation holistically. I think he had a lot of talent around him, but the holistic picture versus some of the other guys that he's compared to, like Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen in Buffalo or Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, those guys have good cultures that they're in. The Browns, to your point, are a train wreck from the neck up. Yeah. Their general manager, their owner, all of that stuff has been a problem. Hopefully maybe after a decade and a half, they found the right people. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and that'll kind of roll into my third team here in a second. So the second one I would kind of ask about is what I consider the question mark team, and that's Pittsburgh. Who are they now? Obviously last year injuries were unbelievably devastating to them. You obviously lost two phenomenal playmakers, and then you lose your quarterback, who's the cornerstone of your entire team. Where do you think Pittsburgh is? Where do you think they're heading in general, and how maybe does that relate in the draft as well?
So this is a problem because where they think they are and where they're heading for a cliff. And everyone knows that because Ben Roethlisberger is 39 years old coming off Tommy John surgery. If you don't prepare for the future, and I understand that you can't always have Steve Young taking over for Joe Montana. You can't have Aaron Rodgers taking over for Brett Favre, but you should try. And I think Minkah Fitzpatrick is a great player who helped them out immensely and helped change their defense last year. That is absolutely true. The problem is they are sitting now with a 39-year-old quarterback with a question mark for an elbow. I don't know if that is literally the structure of his elbow, but that's how it feels in my brain. Yeah. They need to take a quarterback. They need to address the future of the health of their program, and yet they're in a cash-strapped cap position where they have to do X, Y, and Z in the draft, and they don't have a first-round pick. Yeah. So for me, what I want them to do is take Jake Fromm from Georgia. I think that would be a realistic second-round shot they could take. That doesn't help you next year. Yeah. But the whole point of Ben Roethlisberger, if he comes back healthy, is that all of those problems you saw are gone. That offense is built with the quarterback in mind. You take him out and you put some guy named Duck in or a guy named Mason from Oklahoma State, and I don't mean to make fun of all the Masons in the world. Mason's a fine name, but those guys are not built to run that offense. You don't need a new running back to replace James Connors. You need to have your quarterback back so people don't put 13 people in box.
Yeah.
If that happens and he comes back healthy, I think that they're a Super Bowl contender like they always are, and you have a plan for the future. But like I know the Steelers, and like all Steelers fans know the Steelers, they're going to take an immediate contributor in round 2, whether it's an offensive lineman to replace some of those holes, or if it's a defensive player or a receiver, because they think that they're one player away. And when you keep thinking that way, you erode the depth of your team instead of building for the future. And I think that you need to do both, but they are not in a position to do that.
Yeah. It makes me think about my Detroit Tigers behind me back here, because they were doing that for about 4 or 5 years before they decided they had to blow it up. And I kind of feel the same way you do with the Steelers. It's like you're getting to a point where you might have some talent here and there, but you're heading to a point where you have to really reevaluate everything. And lastly, obviously, I mean, it's amazing for me to be able to say this in my lifetime, and I'm glad it's my first podcast. The really hot team, Buffalo. Obviously, I mean, just
and there might not be a season.
I know, and there might not be a season, and you're sitting here going, no Tom Brady, Buffalo. We spent 20 years where they sucked, and it's like, man, we could be the team. So how do you think what Buffalo's done in the offseason? They've obviously done a number of moves. Where do you think they're at finishing free agency, and maybe what they might be doing in the draft?
So first off, to your first question about why I am the way I am, because my team is the Bills, as you know.
I know.
I spent my entire football life. My first memory of football is the Music City Miracle.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of informs you about what I've seen in my football life as a fan.
Yep.
And my personality is, okay, it's broken. How do you fix it? So I've spent my whole life learning how to fix it because I wanted to be the one to fix the Bills. Luckily, someone came along before I was 47 years old and in the NFL or whatever happens from here on out.
Yeah.
They have the best roster in the AFC East right now. And my wife tells me that I have to trust the people in charge because they've done a good job so far. Everything I said about Baker Mayfield, I feel the exact opposite about Josh Allen. Again, I'm rooting for him to succeed. I'm rooting for me to be wrong. But every single instance I've ever seen of bad quarterback play, and I've learned every wrong way to play quarterback by watching the Bills, people don't become more accurate over time. They are what they are when they're the finished product in the NFL. He has spent his entire life throwing that way, moving his feet that way. Habits are built over time. And if you think in 3 years he's going to change every habit about his throwing motion and his accuracy, you're nuts. He's the 1% of people that has the unbelievable discipline to be able to change everything about himself in pressure situations with adrenaline and 300-pound men trying to kill him. So that's my opinion on quarterbacks in general. They have built around his strengths. They have done every single thing to put him in position to succeed. The offensive line, they just brought in Darrell Williams, who I think is going to be a great either right guard or right tackle. Cody Ford is a really good prospect at either of those positions. I think he's a better guard than tackle. And if neither of those guys play well, Ty Nsekhe, the backup there, is a great right tackle. You've got 3 guys for 2 positions that are question mark on the offensive line. They trade for Diggs. Everything we've seen about this offseason was sort of prescient from them about the idea of we can't bring people in, we can't interview people, we can't go to the combine and draft physically. Let's trade our first-round pick for something that we are sure of. Stephon Diggs is a wide receiver number 1, and he has the ability to get open, which is better than being a speed guy. Because I know everyone wants them to go get a speed guy to get the downfield ball going and everything you saw from Josh Allen as a rookie where he was slinging it in the Jacksonville game.
Yep.
When I work for PFF, I get to see the numbers. The reality is last year he didn't throw less accurately than the first year. He just threw it less deep.
Yep.
It's the same accuracy on deep balls. He hit the same number and the same percentage. He just threw it less because they asked him to do that. They have brought in Brian Daboll to have a good system around him that gives him open windows to throw into. They throw in advantageous situations. They have done just everything to put him in position to succeed, and they succeeded. The question is for me, going forward, what happens? Because if you believe in what you've done, and you've done it with a clear-eyed vision of what he is and what he isn't, and then you decide to give him all the quarterback money, then you can't bring in Darrell Williams. You can't go trade for Stephon Diggs. You can't go get X, Y, and Z in free agency to come in along the defensive line. You can't sign every former Panther that's ever existed.
Yep.
So the next 2 years are going to be very critical. As far as the draft, they are in position to take the best player available, literally. They don't really have any holes on the roster. They have places they could improve. So Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, to me, have been everything I've ever wanted in a general manager and a head coach. And that's surprising to me. I feel like defensive coaches typically have a more conservative if you spend your whole life trying to stop people from scoring offense, you tend to cock block yourself and view the offense as the enemy. They haven't done it that way. They've been smart, and I really, 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 really don't want them to screw it up in the next 2 years.
Sure.
But the draft this year is gravy. I'm super excited.
Sure. And I think one of the points you brought up, I always liken it to Bill Belichick being a defensive coach, is I think maybe what they're hoping is that Josh Allen becomes that quarterback that defensive coaches just hate. You know what I mean? That guy who's running everywhere and makes their life miserable. And even though, he's deficient here, deficient there. Well, we've had some statues as well sitting back there who could throw the ball, and they suck too. Meanwhile, you look back to that first year as a rookie, just his ability to run gave us opportunities to be able to because that offense had no talent. I mean, zero talent. Other than Shady, there was no talent. And I think that's what they're hoping. I'm like you. I mean, I want him to be good. I love how exciting he is. But I know that there's some major deficiencies that the average fan look at and go, oh, he's a great God. There's little technique things. And to your, like you said, they don't just change those things overnight, man. I mean, those are things they've done their whole life to this point. So, like I said, I agree with you. I hope we have a season. I hope I get a chance to see the Bills play a Patriots team that doesn't have Brady. I know I got all my friends like, whoa, your guys' the East sucks. And it's like, yeah, but every time you play Tom Brady, you lose. Imagine playing him twice a year, which I know is the mantra of every Bills fan ever.
This is something that obviously being in I call it the border state of Sugar Grove is the Steelers fans. And this is another one of those, how'd he end up so crazy? Is every time I would say something about the Bills, my Steelers friends would be like, oh, the Bills suck. And give me 2 reasons why. If you can give me 2 reasons why, I'll agree with you. but you don't know what you're talking about. And like some of these guys, not to talk in class, but they were on your football team and they didn't have any idea what the hell was wrong.
I know that. Trust me, I know plenty well the deficiencies of number of my players understanding the game. And it is funny too, because every Steelers fan's like, no, Tom Brady owns the NFL, paying the refs. Try that twice a year, every year. All right.
Yeah.
Then you'd understand why everyone in the East has been struggling. Real quick, because we only got a couple minutes, and I don't want to keep you all day. Give me one other NFL team that you think's done really well. Just real briefly, why you think they've had a really good offseason. And then, hey, real quick, tell me about State College. Obviously, you get to work sports in a very passionate area for sports. How do you feel about State College football? Hopefully we have a season.
So the Bills are really the one that I think has done a really good job. The other team that I pay a lot of attention to, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of another team that's done well. The Arizona Cardinals with highway robbery for DeAndre Hopkins was great. If you want to go the opposite way of that, I don't know what the hell Bill O'Brien is doing. Like, he's like a drunk sailor with a tugboat in the harbor. I don't know what he's doing. The San Francisco 49ers, I think, are pretty smart, and they trade DeForest Buckner instead of giving him a lot of money. They get the 13th overall pick. They have 2 picks in the first round, and they were a bit strapped when it came to draft capital. I think that is a really good position to be in, to go to the Super Bowl and have a chance to improve your roster. What they do at 13 is going to determine a lot of that, because if they go and they just replace DeForest Buckner, that's not an improvement on your roster. That is just kind of keeping the water at the same level. I think they can improve and get better this offseason, but they put themselves in position to do so. And I think they're another really well-run organization with a lot of smart people. As far as Penn State football, they're at a bit of a disadvantage because they don't have offseason. This weekend's supposed to be the blue-white game. We'd be neck deep in spring content, talking about the brand new offense. Having so many new coaches in this offseason, I think, is a challenge. The good news is I do believe Kirk Shiraka is one of those guys that is going to make a huge difference. And everything I've talked about can be summed up this way. No position, I'm not talking out of it, like everyone knows this, no position is more important than the quarterback position. People who have a proven track record of making quarterbacks better over time, regardless of their talent, should be immediate priorities when it comes to coaching. And Kirk Shiraka has proven that both at Minnesota and at Western Michigan when he was with PJ Fleck in the fight and row the boats. I'm super excited to see what they bring, because I think he'll bring a clarity to the position for Sean Clifford. I felt at times the intelligence and aggressiveness from Clifford was getting confused in a lot of complexity. And if you can simplify that position, one of the greatest things about play action, here's another thing, play action creates one-on-one situations in football, which is an 11-man sport. If you can turn football into basketball, you're making the job of the quarterback so much easier. And I saw so much of that from Kirk Shiraka in the Minnesota offense when I was studying them. And then obviously in the game, you saw them dunking on Penn State left and right. And then they go and they get that coach to be the offensive coordinator. That is, I think, a really great hire. It fits really well with what James Franklin wants. And I think a lot of people don't give him enough credit for knowing football very well. Because he's not a defensive genius or he's not an offensive genius doesn't mean he doesn't understand exactly what's going on. Just because he himself didn't captain some great offense at some point in his career, he knows the important points of football. And as the architect of everything at Penn State, I think he's doing a great job. His vision is very good, and he's a great identifier of talent. And that includes coaches as well.
I'll tell you, and again, I'm not even the world's biggest Penn State fan, just because everyone loves Penn State. But I love college football in general, period.
Right.
But anyone who's ever listened to Coach Franklin, I know I've listened to him a number of times, been down to the conferences, been down to the clinics. I think if you were to even talk to the guy, he'll be – I have never seen a coach, and I've listened to a lot of coaches on the college level. I know a lot of coaches on the college level. I have never seen a coach who breaks down his staff the way he does. And it goes to your point. Like, yeah, he's not going to sit there and talk to you a lot about X's and O's. You want that Matt Rule. Like, I love Matt Rule. Personally, I love Matt Rule. He's a great guy. He was super helpful for me as a coach. Matt Rule, man, that dude will talk X's and O's all day with you. Coach Franklin, I mean, First day he comes in there, he talks about, I've got these coaches here. I've got these coaches to oversee these coaches. He runs a structure. He runs an organization. I think he's almost more like his head coach job is more of a general manager than it is anything else. He makes sure to have the right people in the right places doing the right things. And that's one of the things I really respect about Coach Franklin. I think you hit it top of the top of the nail right there. He structures his team, and he definitely doesn't get enough respect because when he came in, this is allegedly going to be a crap show. And all it's done is turned itself into a legitimate powerhouse. I mean, a legitimate
literally did not have a losing season
Exactly.
with sanctions and all those stuff. Like objectively, if you look at that, that's incredibly impressive.
It's amazing. And I say that as a non-Penn State fan. It's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that it'll be real interesting to see, obviously everyone. I mean, I even see, from our high school teams, not having springtime, not having off-season workouts, not having all these things. It's going to make it very, very difficult this fall. Hopefully we have football, but it's definitely going to make it really difficult. Hey, we're up against the end there. I just really want to thank you so much for coming on here. I hope I can get you on here more. I love sitting here talking football with you and having you kind of give your input, and you got a hell of a lot of expertise because you've been doing this a while and you do it really professionally. So I appreciate you being on. And like I said, I'm super proud of you. All right. And I don't want to get all sappy here, we're dudes.
You're going to make me cry.
But yeah, I was like, seriously though, I'm super proud of you. I mean, I cannot tell you there are, guys that have played ball for me that have, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I've been blessed to have a lot of guys who've gone out and do tremendous things. But you're one of those guys that what your goal was, I knew how tough it was going to be. And trust me, when I got into college and I got a chance to coach college ball, like when you're talking about I'm going to do it for free, man, when I got a chance to do it in college, I was doing it for free. All right. When you're a GA, you get a little crap stipend pay. And I'd go pick up the bagels and the coffee in the morning. I'm sneaking bagels because I'm unbelievably hungry because I ain't got no money. I know what it's like to do that job where you're the guy. It's like, I'm doing the crappiest things, but that's how you get into the system. That's why I'm super proud of you because I know how much you sacrifice to get to where you're at and where you're going, man.
I learned it growing up in a place like Sugar Grove. Honestly, the hard work, my grandfather, probably about as good as I do at this point. You learn all those lessons that hard work doesn't take a day off and you don't get to sleep in if you want to go and get something. And, I learned that from you. I learned that from my parents. Like I was really lucky to be born and to live in a place like Sugar Grove. And it made me who I am. And I'm proud of that. Even if I'm a little nuts sometimes, I'm proud of it.
Yep. Well, we're all proud of you, and I appreciate you being on, man. Thanks, all right? You have a good day.
Take care.
Yepper.
Well, guys, thanks for being here. Whenever you get a chance to follow Thomas Frank, be on the lookout for his articles and check out Pro Football Focus. And again, hey, TF, thanks for being on. I really appreciate it. Again, guys, like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Leave a comment and check us out on iHeartRadio and iTunes and, of course, Podbean. And until next time, be safe and live life to the fullest without excuses, even in crazy times like these. See ya.